The phone screamed into the silence of our bedroom at 3:17 a.m. Not a gentle buzz or a polite chime, but that old-fashioned landline ring that cuts through sleep like a knife through paper. My husband David didn't stir. He never did. 20 years of marriage had taught me that the man could sleep through a freight train running through our living room. I fumbled in the darkness, my hand knocking over the water glass on my nightstand. The ringing persisted, angry and insistent. When my fingers finally closed around the receiver, I pressed it to my ear without checking the caller ID. "Hello?" My voice came out rough, thick with interrupted dreams. There was a pause on the other end. Not empty silence, but the kind filled with breathing, with presence, with intention. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." Then a woman's voice, cold and sharp as winter steel. "Put my husband on the phone." I sat up straighter, suddenly awake. The red numbers on our alarm clock glowed accusingly in the dark. David's breathing continued in its steady rhythm beside me, oblivious. "I'm sorry, who is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level even as my heart began to hammer against my ribs. "You heard me." The woman's tone didn't waver. "Put David on the phone. Now." "My name is Rachel Moreno. I'm 43 years old, a patient advocate at Mercy Ridge Medical Center in Portland, Oregon. I've been married to David for 2 decades. We have a daughter in college, a mortgage we're still paying down, and a vegetable garden that produces more zucchini than any family should reasonably consume. Our life is ordinary in all the ways that matter, built on trust and routine and the comfortable rhythms of middle age. Or so I thought until that phone call split our quiet Tuesday night in half. "I think you have the wrong number," I said carefully, but my hand was already moving toward David's shoulder. "I don't." The woman's laugh was short and bitter. "Believe me, I know exactly who I'm calling. Now either you wake him up, or I come over there and do it myself. Your choice." The line went dead. I sat there in the darkness, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. A mistake. A prank. A wrong number despite her certainty. Or something else entirely, something that would explain the intimate knowledge in her voice when she said my husband's name. David stirred beside me, mumbling something about the light. "Who was that?" he asked, his words slurred with sleep. I looked at him in the dim glow from the hallway nightlight. His face was relaxed, innocent, the face of a man with nothing to hide. The same face I'd woken up next to for 20 years. "Wrong number," I heard myself say. He grunted and rolled over, already falling back into sleep. But I stayed awake, watching the ceiling, listening to my own heartbeat, and wondering why I had just lied. The coffee at Mercy Ridge Medical Center tasted like burnt regret at 6 in the morning, but I drank it anyway. Sleep had been impossible after that call. I'd laid awake for 3 hours, staring at the dark ceiling, running through every conversation David and I had shared in recent months, looking for cracks I might have missed. Around 5, I'd given up and driven to work early. The hospital was quiet at this hour, just the night shift dragging toward dawn and people like me who couldn't face their own homes. I sat in my small office on the 3rd floor, surrounded by patient files and insurance forms, trying to focus on anything except the echo of that woman's voice. "Put my husband on the phone." The certainty in those words haunted me. She hadn't asked for David Moreno or requested to speak with someone at this number. She had claimed ownership. My husband. As if I were the interloper in this equation. "You look like hell." George Patterson appeared in my doorway, holding 2 cups of the terrible hospital coffee. He was 67, 3 months from retirement, and had worked in hospital administration longer than I'd been alive. His white hair stuck up in unruly tufts, and his reading glasses hung from a chain around his neck. "Couldn't sleep," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. George settled into the chair across from my desk with a grunt. "The Henderson case still eating at you?" I'd almost forgotten about the Henderson case. Mrs. Henderson, 72, denied coverage for a surgery that would save her life because of some paperwork technicality. I'd spent the last week fighting with insurance companies, filing appeals, making calls that went nowhere. It was the kind of battle that made me question why I'd chosen this job in the first place. Among other things, I said. George studied me with those shrewd eyes that had seen 3 decades of hospital politics and personal dramas. Want to talk about it? I opened my mouth, then closed it. What would I even say? My husband got a call at 3 a.m. from a woman claiming he was hers. It sounded ridiculous in the light of day, like something from a daytime soap opera, not real life. Just tired, I said finally. He didn't believe me. I could see it in the way his mouth pressed into a thin line. But George was old school. He believed in privacy, in letting people work through their own problems unless they explicitly asked for help. Well, you might want to grab a power nap before the staff meeting, he said, heaving himself out of the chair. Linda's on the warpath about something. I heard her in her office at 5:30 this morning, shouting into her phone. Linda Brennan. My immediate supervisor and the director of patient services. She was 48 going on 80, with a rigid adherence to protocol that would make a military general weep with envy. Where I saw patients who needed help, Linda saw potential liability issues and budget line items. What else is new? I muttered. George paused at the door. Rachel. Whatever it is, don't let it eat you alive. Life's too short for that kind of poison. After he left, I tried to focus on work. The Henderson appeal needed to be filed by noon. I had 3 other cases requiring immediate attention, including a young mother whose cancer treatment had been delayed because of insurance red tape. These were real problems, life and death situations that deserved my full attention. But my mind kept drifting back to that phone call. The woman's voice had been cultured, educated. Not angry exactly, but forceful. Entitled. Like someone used to getting what they wanted. I pulled out my phone and stared at David's contact photo. We'd taken it last summer at Cannon Beach, the 2 of us squinting into the sun, windblown and happy. He worked as an IT consultant, mostly from home these days. His schedule was flexible, his clients scattered across multiple time zones. He could take calls at odd hours without it seeming strange. My fingers hovered over his number. What would I even ask? Did a woman call you last night claiming you were her husband? It sounded insane. Instead, I opened our phone records online. Our carrier let us view call logs in real time. I scrolled through the previous night's activity. There it was. 3:17 a.m. Incoming call from a Portland number I didn't recognize. I copied the number into a search engine. Nothing came up except one of those reverse phone lookup sites that wanted money for information. I stared at those 10 digits until they blurred together. The rational part of my brain insisted there had to be an explanation. A drunk dial. A confused elderly person. Some kind of scam. But the other part, the part that had been married long enough to know when something felt wrong, whispered different possibilities. Rachel. Tyler Webb's voice made me jump. He stood in my doorway, tablet in hand, his expression annoyingly cheerful for this hour of the morning. Tyler was 31, ambitious, and had been angling for my position since the day he transferred to patient services 6 months ago. Did you finish the quarterly report? Linda wants it before the meeting. I'd completely forgotten about the quarterly report. Almost done, I lied, pulling up the half-finished document on my computer. Tyler lingered, peering at my screen. You know, if you're overwhelmed, I'm happy to take some cases off your hands. I've got capacity. What he meant was, I'm younger, faster, and gunning for your job. Hand over your workload so I can prove I'm better at it than you are. I'm fine, I said tersely. The report will be ready. After he left, I spent the next 2 hours racing through patient files and statistics, cobbling together a report that would satisfy Linda's obsession with metrics and outcomes. My personal crisis would have to wait. In the hierarchy of immediate problems, a mysterious phone call ranked somewhere below insurance denials that could cost people their lives. The staff meeting started at 9 sharp. Linda ran her meetings like military operations, with timed agendas and zero tolerance for tangents. She stood at the head of the conference table in her severe navy suit, her silver hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face. "Let's begin with patient satisfaction scores," she announced, pulling up a presentation that made my eyes glaze over immediately. I tried to focus, I really did. But my mind kept wandering back to my house, to David probably just waking up, pouring his coffee, checking his emails. Living his normal life. Or was it normal? How much of what I thought I knew was real? "Rachel." Linda's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. "I asked you a question." Everyone was looking at me. Tyler smirked from across the table. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. "The Henderson case. Where do we stand on the appeal?" "Filed this morning," I said, which was almost true. I'd file it right after the meeting. I'm hopeful we'll get approval. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The medical necessity is clear. "Hopeful isn't a metric," Linda said coldly. "Either we get results or we don't. This department can't afford to waste resources on lost causes." Something in her tone made my exhaustion and anxiety crystallize into anger. "Mrs. Henderson isn't a lost cause. She's a 72-year-old woman who paid her premiums for 40 years and deserves the care her policy promised. What she deserves and what's financially viable are two different conversations." "Are they?" I heard myself saying. "Because from where I sit, we're supposed to be advocates, not accountants." The room went quiet. George caught my eye from across the table, a warning look that I ignored. Linda's expression could have frozen lava. "My office. After this meeting. Everyone else, let's continue." I sat through the rest of the meeting in a fog of dread and defiance. I just challenged my supervisor in front of the entire department. In Linda's world, that was equivalent to mutiny. With my performance review coming up in 2 months, I'd basically handed her ammunition to push me out. But I couldn't bring myself to care as much as I should have. The phone call had knocked something loose inside me, some carefully maintained balance between compliance and conscience. If my marriage was falling apart, if my husband was living some secret life I knew nothing about, then what did any of this corporate posturing matter? When the meeting finally ended, I followed Linda to her office like a student heading to the principal. Her space was immaculate, everything at right angles, not a paper out of place. She closed the door with deliberate care before turning to face me. "I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume you're dealing with something personal," she said. "Because the Rachel I know doesn't publicly undermine her supervisor." "I apologize for the tone," I said, keeping my voice even. "But not for the sentiment. We're losing sight of why we do this work." Linda sat behind her desk, steepling her fingers. "I've been in healthcare administration for 23 years. Do you know what I've learned? That good intentions don't pay the bills. This hospital operates on razor-thin margins. Every case we fight and lose costs money we don't have. At some point, you have to accept that we can't save everyone. So we shouldn't try. We should be strategic." She leaned forward. "Rachel, you're good at what you do. But you're too emotionally invested. You take every loss personally. That's not sustainable." She was right, in her way. I did take it personally. Every denied claim, every patient who slipped through the cracks, every person who chose between medication and rent, I carried all of it. Maybe that made me bad at the business side of healthcare. But it also made me good at the human side. "I'll be more mindful going forward," I said, giving her what she wanted to hear. Linda studied me for a long moment. "Take the afternoon off. You look exhausted. Whatever's going on, sort it out before it affects your work more than it already has." I should have been grateful for the reprieve. Instead, I felt dismissed, like a problem being swept aside. But I nodded and left her office, grabbing my bag and heading for the parking garage before she could change her mind. The drive home took 20 minutes through mid-morning traffic. Our neighborhood in Eastmoreland was quiet this time of day, the streets lined with mature trees just beginning to turn autumn gold. I pulled into our driveway behind David's car and sat there for a moment, staring at our house. It was a craftsman bungalow we bought 15 years ago, stretching our budget to the breaking point. We'd painted it sage green with white trim. I'd planted the roses along the front path. David had built the deck in the backyard. Every corner held memories of our life together. I found him in his home office, hunched over his computer, wireless headset on, talking to someone about server configurations. He glanced up when I appeared in the doorway, surprise crossing his face. "Hey, what are you doing home?" he mouthed, holding up a finger to indicate he needed a minute to finish his call. I watched him while he worked through whatever technical crisis had erupted. He was wearing the gray t-shirt I'd bought him for his birthday, old jeans, his usual work-from-home uniform. His dark hair needed a cut, falling across his forehead in a way that would have annoyed him if he weren't too busy to care. He looked exactly like himself. Familiar. Safe. Or maybe I was just seeing what I wanted to see. When he finally ended the call and pulled off his headset, his smile was warm and genuine. "Everything okay? You never come home this early." "Linda gave me the afternoon off," I said, which was technically true. "I couldn't sleep last night." "Yeah, you were tossing and turning pretty bad." He stood and stretched, his back cracking. "Want me to make you some lunch?" This was the moment. I could ask him. I could tell him about the call, watch his reaction, demand answers. The words were right there, pressing against my teeth. But fear held me silent. Because once I asked, once I opened that door, there was no closing it again. Either I'd learn I was being paranoid and damage the trust between us, or I'd learn something I couldn't unknow. "Sure," I said instead. "Lunch sounds good." We moved to the kitchen, falling into our comfortable domestic dance. David pulled out bread and cheese for grilled sandwiches while I made a salad. We talked about normal things, our daughter's latest call from college, the leak in the bathroom that needed fixing, whether we should go to his sister's house for Thanksgiving. It felt surreal, performing normalcy while that phone call sat between us like a landmine waiting to be triggered. "You seem distracted," David said as we sat down to eat. "What's really going on?" I looked at him across our kitchen table, this man I'd built a life with. 20 years of shared history, of inside jokes and quiet moments and weathered storms. 20 years of trust. "Just work stress," I said, taking a bite of my sandwich. And in that moment, I knew I'd made a choice. Not to confront him, not yet. But to find out the truth on my own first. Because if my husband was hiding something, I needed to know what it was before I decided how to respond. The woman on the phone had sounded so certain. So entitled to him. And David, sitting across from me eating his lunch, looked like he didn't have a secret in the world. One of us was lying. I just wasn't sure which one yet. The investigation started small, almost accidentally. That afternoon, after David went back to his office for another call, I stood in our bedroom staring at his nightstand. The drawer was slightly open, revealing the usual detritus of married life, old receipts, loose change, a book he'd been meaning to read for months, phone chargers tangled like electronic spaghetti. I'd never been the kind of wife who snooped. The thought had never even crossed my mind before. Our marriage had always operated on a foundation of trust so solid I never questioned it. But that woman's voice had planted something dark and persistent in my mind, a seed of doubt that was already sending out roots. My hand reached for the drawer before I could talk myself out of it. I pulled it open fully, feeling like a criminal in my own home. Nothing suspicious greeted me. Just the mundane evidence of a life lived. I checked the receipts, all from places he'd mentioned going. Coffee shops, the grocery store, the hardware store where he'd bought supplies for fixing the deck railing. His phone was the obvious next step, but David kept it with him constantly. Even now, I could hear him on a video call in his office, his voice carrying down the hallway in that professional tone he used with clients. Besides, most phones were password protected. I didn't even know his passcode. Had never needed to. I moved to his closet instead, running my hands along the pockets of jackets and coats. A movie ticket stub from a film we'd seen together last month. A grocery list in my handwriting that he must have pocketed. A business card from a potential client. Nothing incriminating. Nothing that suggested a double life or secret phone calls at 3 a.m. Feeling foolish and slightly disgusted with myself, I closed the closet door and sat on the edge of our bed. The rational part of my brain insisted I was overreacting. One strange phone call didn't mean anything. Maybe it really was a wrong number, just an incredibly specific and weird one. Maybe the woman was mentally ill, randomly dialing numbers and making accusations. Maybe I was letting exhaustion and work stress turn a bizarre incident into a conspiracy. But the other part of my brain, the instinctive part that had been honed by 2 decades of reading David's moods and microexpressions, whispered that something was off. Not in anything I could point to directly, but in 1,000 tiny details that didn't quite add up. The way he'd been spending more time in his office lately. The new cologne I'd noticed last month that he'd said was a gift from a client. The fact that he'd started taking his phone into the bathroom when he showered, something he'd never done before. Or had he always done that, and I just hadn't noticed? I grabbed my own phone and pulled up that number again. The one from 3:17 this morning. My finger hovered over the call button. I could just dial it, see who answered, ask directly what the hell was going on. But what would I say? "Hi, you called my house at 3 a.m. claiming my husband is yours. Care to explain?" It sounded unhinged. And if David really was innocent, if this was all some misunderstanding, then I'd be starting a fire where there was no smoke. Instead, I opened a web browser and typed the number into a search engine again. This time, I went deeper than the first page of results. On the third page, buried in a forum about identifying spam calls, someone had posted about receiving calls from this number. According to them, it belonged to a Dr. Victoria Hayes, and they'd gotten it because of some mix-up with a medical appointment. Dr. Victoria Hayes. The name meant nothing to me. I opened a new tab and searched for the name along with Portland. Several results popped up. A Victoria Hayes who was a dentist in Beaverton. Another who was a veterinarian in Lake Oswego. And then, halfway down the page, a link to Mercy Ridge Medical Center's staff directory. My heart stopped. Dr. Victoria Hayes. Chief of Cardiology. Mercy Ridge Medical Center. She worked at my hospital. Not just worked there, she was one of the top physicians, a department head. I'd probably walked past her in the hallways dozens of times without knowing it. The hospital employed over 2,000 people. It wasn't unusual for our paths never to have crossed in any meaningful way. I clicked through to her profile page. The photo showed a woman in her early 40s with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, sharp cheekbones, and the kind of confident gaze that came from years of making life and death decisions. She was beautiful in that polished, intimidating way some professional women managed effortlessly. Her credentials were impressive. Medical degree from Johns Hopkins. Residency at Massachusetts General. Multiple publications in prestigious cardiology journals. Awards for clinical excellence. She joined Mercy Ridge 5 years ago after a stint at a hospital in Boston. 5 years. David and I had lived in Portland our entire married life. If there was a connection between them, it would have had to develop in the last 5 years. Unless they'd known each other before, unless this went back further than I wanted to imagine. I took a screenshot of her photo and saved it to my phone. Then I cleared my browser history, feeling paranoid and ridiculous but doing it anyway. When I emerged from the bedroom, David was in the kitchen making coffee. "Want some?" he asked, holding up the pot. "Sure." I studied his face, looking for any sign of guilt or nervousness. Nothing. He just looked tired, rubbing his eyes in that way he did when he'd been staring at screens too long. "Rough day?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Client in New York is panicking about their security protocols. Again." He poured 2 mugs, added cream to mine the way I liked it. How about you? Feeling any better? A little. The break helped. We stood in our kitchen drinking coffee, and I wondered how many other couples were having this exact same moment right now. Normal conversation, comfortable silence, the machinery of marriage running smoothly on the surface while one person harbored secrets and the other harbored suspicions. I was thinking, David said, setting his mug down. Maybe we should plan a weekend away. Just the 2 of us. We haven't done that in forever. The suggestion caught me off guard. Was this guilt talking? Or genuine desire to spend time together? That sounds nice, I said carefully. Where were you thinking? I don't know. The coast, maybe? We could rent one of those places in Cannon Beach, walk on the beach, eat too much seafood. He smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way that made my chest ache. We used to do that all the time. We used to do a lot of things. Something flickered across his face. Yeah. I guess we got busy. Life gets in the way. Or secrets get in the way, I thought but didn't say. Instead, I finished my coffee and told him I was going to take a nap. In our bedroom, I set an alarm for 2 hours and lay down, but sleep was impossible. I stared at the ceiling, turning everything over in my mind. A cardiologist. A woman who spent her days holding human hearts in her hands, making split-second decisions that determined whether people lived or died. What would a woman like that want with David? He was a good man, a kind husband, but he wasn't wealthy or powerful or any of the things I imagined someone like Dr. Victoria Hayes would be drawn to. Unless I didn't know my husband as well as I thought I did. The alarm went off at 4. I silenced it and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from work, all from George Patterson. I called him back, and he answered on the first ring. Rachel, thank God. Listen, something's come up with the Henderson case. My stomach dropped. What happened? The insurance company approved the appeal. Full coverage for the surgery. Mrs. Henderson called me crying, wanted to thank you personally. Relief flooded through me, the first pure positive emotion I'd felt all day. That's incredible. I didn't think they'd actually approve it. Neither did I, honestly. You must have written one hell of an appeal. He paused. Linda wants to see you first thing tomorrow morning. I think she's planning to acknowledge you at the staff meeting. Might want to smooth things over after this morning. After I'd hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed feeling unmoored. Mrs. Henderson would get her surgery. One life saved, at least temporarily. It should have felt like a victory, but instead it just highlighted how much of my energy was being consumed by this other thing, this terrible suspicion that was eating me alive from the inside. I needed to know the truth. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. The hospital was a 15-minute drive from our house. I could go there now, before the evening shift change, while the administrative offices would still be open. I could find Dr. Victoria Hayes and confront her directly. Ask her why she'd called my house, what she wanted with my husband, what the hell was going on. But what if David noticed I'd left? What if he asked where I'd been? I pulled up the Find My Phone app that we used to keep tabs on each other's locations. It was something we'd set up years ago for safety, never thinking it might become a tool for surveillance. David's phone showed him still at home, in his office. He'd probably be on calls for hours yet. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my keys and headed for the garage. David was on a video call when I passed his office, his back to the door. I slipped out without him noticing. The drive to Mercy Ridge felt surreal. I'd made this trip thousands of times, but never with this sense of purpose, this dread pooling in my stomach. The evening sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, beautiful and indifferent to human drama. I parked in the visitor lot instead of my usual employee spot, some instinct telling me to maintain a degree of anonymity. The hospital's main entrance was busy with shift change, nurses and doctors and support staff flowing in and out. I kept my head down and made my way to the administrative wing where the department heads had their offices. The cardiology department was on the 5th floor. I took the elevator up, my heart pounding harder with each floor. What was I doing? This was insane. I should turn around, go home, talk to David like an adult instead of stalking his alleged mistress at work. But I didn't turn around. I stepped off the elevator and followed the signs to the cardiology offices. The waiting area was empty, just a receptionist packing up her desk for the day. "Can I help you?" she asked, giving me a curious look. I realized I was still wearing my work badge from this morning, the one that identified me as patient services, not cardiology. "I need to speak with Dr. Hayes," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Is she available?" The receptionist checked her computer. "She's finishing up with a patient consult." "Do you have an appointment?" "It's urgent." "About a patient." The lie came easily, smoothly. I was getting good at lying, apparently. She hesitated, then picked up her phone and spoke quietly into it. After a moment, she hung up and nodded. "She'll see you in a few minutes. You can wait over there." I sat in one of the plastic chairs, my hands clasped in my lap to keep them from shaking. Around me, the hospital hummed with its usual rhythm. An overhead page called Dr. Someone to the ICU. A phlebotomist pushed a cart of blood samples down the hallway. Everything was normal, routine, while I sat there waiting to confront the woman who might be sleeping with my husband. 10 minutes passed. 15. I was starting to think about leaving when a door opened down the hallway and she emerged. Dr. Victoria Hayes looked exactly like her photo, but more so. Taller than I'd expected, moving with the kind of confidence that comes from years of being the smartest person in the room. She wore navy scrubs and a white coat, her dark hair twisted up, a stethoscope draped around her neck. When she saw me, something flickered across her face. Recognition? Surprise? It was gone too quickly for me to be sure. "You wanted to see me about a patient?" Her voice was the same one from the phone. Cold, precise, unmistakable. I stood, my legs unsteady. "Not exactly. We need to talk about the phone call you made to my house last night." Her expression didn't change, but I saw her posture shift slightly, like a boxer preparing for a fight. "I think you have me confused with someone else." 3:17 in the morning. "You called my house and told me to put your husband on the phone." I kept my voice low but firm. "That was you. I know it was you." For a long moment, we just looked at each other. The receptionist had left for the day. The hallway was empty except for the two of us. Finally, Victoria Hayes took a step closer. "Maybe we should discuss this in my office." It wasn't a question. She turned and walked back down the hallway, clearly expecting me to follow. After a brief hesitation, I did. Her office was larger than mine, with a window overlooking the parking lot and framed diplomas covering one wall. She closed the door behind us and leaned against her desk, arms crossed. "You're Rachel Moreno," she said. "Patient services. I've seen your name on charts. And you called my house in the middle of the night demanding to speak to my husband." I was past caring about professionalism or courtesy. "I want to know why." Victoria studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to my shock, she laughed. Not a warm laugh, but one edged with bitterness. "Your husband," she repeated. "That's rich. Tell me, Rachel, how long have you been married to David?" 20 years. "Not that it's any of your business." 20 years. She shook her head. "And in all that time, did he ever mention being married before?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "David Moreno and I were married for 3 years. We divorced 7 years ago, right before he apparently decided to start a whole new life in Portland." Her voice was steady, but I could hear rage underneath it. "So you'll forgive me if I have trouble thinking of him as your husband when legally, technically, he might still be mine." The room tilted. I grabbed the back of the chair in front of me to steady myself. "That's impossible. David's never been married before. I would know." Victoria moved to her desk and pulled out a folder. From it, she extracted several documents and laid them on the desk where I could see them. A marriage certificate from Massachusetts, dated 8 years ago. Wedding photos showing a younger David in a suit, standing next to the woman in front of me. And finally, a legal document that made my blood run cold. Divorce papers. Filed but never finalized. Status, pending. We separated when I moved here for the position at Mercy Ridge, Victoria explained, her voice taking on a clinical tone, like she was describing a medical procedure instead of the implosion of my entire life. The plan was to finalize the divorce remotely. David was supposed to sign his portion of the paperwork and file it. I assumed he had. Why wouldn't he? We both wanted out. I stared at the documents, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. This doesn't make sense. If you two were married, if you weren't divorced, then how could he marry me? That's the question, isn't it? Victoria's expression was almost sympathetic now. Either he lied to both of us, or he's technically a bigamist. I only found out he'd remarried last week when I was filing some updated paperwork and the lawyer informed me our divorce was never completed. Apparently, David never filed his portion. Which means, legally, we might still be married. The implications crashed over me in waves. If David was still married to Victoria, then our marriage wasn't legal. Our daughter was born to parents who weren't actually married. The house, the bank accounts, everything we'd built together existed in some kind of legal limbo. Why call the house? I heard myself ask. Why not just contact a lawyer? Victoria's jaw tightened. I've been trying to reach him for a week. He won't return my calls. Won't respond to emails. I got desperate last night. I thought maybe if I called the house, if you answered, he'd have to face this. So you've never actually spoken to him? About any of this? Not since we separated 7 years ago. She picked up one of the wedding photos, staring at it. I thought we'd both moved on. I had no idea he'd created this whole other life. No idea you existed until my lawyer told me. I sank into the chair, my legs giving out. 20 years of marriage. A daughter. A mortgage. A life built on what I'd thought was solid ground, only to discover it had been quicksand all along. I need to leave, I said, standing abruptly. The room swayed, and Victoria reached out to steady me. Are you all right? Do you need water? I need to go home. I need to talk to David. Wait. Victoria held out a business card. Here's my lawyer's information. You're going to need legal advice. And Rachel? I turned at the door. I'm sorry. I know you probably don't believe me, but I am. I didn't call to ruin your life. I called because I need to move on with mine, and I can't do that while I'm still legally tied to a man who apparently never bothered to untie the knot. I took the card without looking at it and walked out of her office, down the hallway, into the elevator. My mind was blank, shock having wiped it clean of coherent thought. It wasn't until I reached my car that the full weight of it hit me, and I sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel, and finally let myself cry. David wasn't who I thought he was. Our marriage might not even be real. And the worst part, the part that made my chest feel like it was caving in, was that I had to go home and look him in the eye and ask him to explain how he'd managed to destroy everything we'd built with a lie that had lasted 20 years. The drive home passed in a blur. I don't remember making the turns or stopping at lights. I just somehow ended up in our driveway again as the sun finished setting, painting our sage greenhouse in shades of purple and shadow. David's car was still there. The lights were on in the living room. I could see his silhouette moving past the window. Just a normal evening in our normal house, except nothing about it was normal anymore and maybe never had been. I sat in the car for a long time, the card from Victoria's lawyer heavy in my pocket, the weight of 20 years of lies sitting on my chest like a stone. Finally, when I couldn't put it off any longer, I opened the car door and walked toward the house. Toward whatever truth was waiting for me on the other side. The front door felt heavier than usual when I pushed it open. Inside, The house smelled like the chicken stir-fry David had probably made for dinner. Normal domestic smells in a home that suddenly felt like a stage set, all facade with nothing real behind it. David was in the living room, feet up on the ottoman, laptop balanced on his knees. He looked up when I came in, and his smile was so genuine, so unguarded, that for a moment I almost convinced myself Victoria Hayes had made the whole thing up. That the documents were forgeries, the photos were doctored, that there was some reasonable explanation for all of it. "Hey, you were gone a while. I saved you some dinner." He started to get up, but I held up a hand to stop him. "We need to talk." Something in my voice made his smile falter. He set the laptop aside slowly, carefully, buying himself time. "Okay. What's going on?" I couldn't do this standing up. I moved to the armchair across from him, the one I always sat in when we watched television together. How many nights had we spent in these exact positions, comfortable and companionable, discussing our days, making plans, living the lie. "I went to the hospital this afternoon," I began, watching his face carefully. "I met someone. Dr. Victoria Hayes." The color drained from David's face so quickly I thought he might pass out. His hands gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles going white. For several seconds, he didn't speak. He just stared at me like I'd pulled a gun on him. "Rachel, I can explain." "Then explain." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too calm, too detached. Shock was a funny thing. It numbed you when you most needed to feel. Explain how you're apparently still married to another woman. Explain how our entire marriage might be illegal. Explain how you lied to me for 20 years. I didn't lie. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when he was stressed. Now it just looked like a sign of guilt. Not exactly. Victoria and we were separated. We agreed to divorce. I thought we had divorced. I signed papers, I gave them to a lawyer. But you never filed them. I thought the lawyer did. I assumed it was all handled. He leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. By the time I met you, I honestly believed I was divorced. I didn't intentionally commit bigamy, Rachel. You have to believe that. What I believe, I said slowly, is that you're a 45-year-old man who somehow forgot to follow up on his own divorce. What I believe is that you built a life with me, had a child with me, bought a house with me, all without bothering to make sure you were actually free to do any of that. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, David? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you wanted to erase your past so badly you just pretended it didn't exist. And you were fine with that until your past called me at 3 a.m. He flinched. She called you? When? Last night. You slept right through it. I watched him process this, saw the wheels turning behind his eyes. She told me to put her husband on the phone. I thought she was crazy. Turns out she was the only one telling the truth. David stood up and started pacing, a caged animal looking for an exit that didn't exist. Okay. Okay, this is bad. I know this is bad. But we can fix it. I'll call my lawyer first thing tomorrow. We'll file whatever paperwork needs to be filed. The divorce will be finalized, and then we can just have a quiet ceremony, make our marriage legal retroactively. Retroactively. I tasted the word, bitter on my tongue. You think we can just fix this with paperwork? David, our daughter's birth certificate lists you as my husband. Our tax returns. Our insurance. Everything we've built is based on a legal fiction. But we love each other. That's real. Our life together, our family, that's real. He came toward me, reaching for my hands, but I pulled away. Is it? Because I thought I knew you. I thought after 20 years, there was nothing about you I didn't know. And it turns out I don't know you at all. That's not fair, Rachel. I'm the same person I was yesterday, the same person you've been married to for 2 decades. One administrative error doesn't change that. I laughed, a harsh sound that made him step back. An administrative error? Is that what we're calling it? You're still legally married to another woman, David. You have been our entire relationship. That's not a paperwork mix-up. That's a fundamental betrayal of everything we're supposed to be. I didn't know. His voice broke. I swear to you, I thought it was handled. When I met you, when I fell in love with you, I believed I was free to do that. I would never have married you if I'd known. Wouldn't you? The question hung in the air between us. Because it seems like not knowing was awfully convenient. You didn't have to deal with an awkward explanation or a messy situation. You just got to start fresh with me, and damn the consequences. He sank back onto the couch, his face in his hands. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. What do you want me to say? That I should have been more careful? I should have. That I should have followed up and made absolutely sure everything was finalized. I should have. But I didn't, and I can't change that now. All I can do is try to make it right. How? I heard my voice rising, the shock wearing off and making room for anger. How do you make this right, David? Do you have any idea what this means? If our marriage isn't legal, I have no claim to this house we supposedly own together. Our daughter could face legal complications. Our insurance, our retirement accounts, everything is compromised. We'll figure it out. We'll hire lawyers, fix whatever needs fixing. With what money? We're barely keeping our heads above water as it is. I stood up, needing to move, needing to do something with the energy coursing through me. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that I have to question everything now. Every conversation we've ever had. Every story you've told me about your past. How much of it was true? What else have you conveniently forgotten to mention? Nothing. Rachel, I swear, there's nothing else. He stood too, following me as I paced. Victoria and I were married for 3 years. It was a mistake from the start. We were too young, too different. We tried to make it work, but it just didn't. When we split up, it was mutual. Clean. Or so I thought. You never mentioned her. Not once in 20 years. I stopped and turned to face him. We've talked about past relationships. I told you about the guy I dated in college, the one who broke my heart. You said you'd had a few serious girlfriends but nothing that lasted. You lied right to my face. I didn't think it mattered. It was over. Why drag up a failed marriage when I was trying to build a new life? Because it's part of who you are. Because in a real marriage, in a real partnership, you don't get to just edit out the parts of your history you don't like. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. We both froze, staring at each other. David moved toward the door, but I grabbed his arm. Don't answer it. It could be important. Everything is important right now, David. Everything in our entire life is hanging by a thread. But he pulled away and went to the door anyway. Through the front window, I could see a figure on the porch. My heart lurched. What if it was Victoria? What if she decided to come here, to confront us both together? David opened the door. A young man stood there, probably in his mid-20s, holding a manila envelope. David Moreno? Yes? You've been served. He handed over the envelope and walked back to a car parked at the curb. David stood in the doorway, staring at the envelope like it might explode. I crossed to him and took it from his numb fingers. Inside were legal documents. A petition to finalize divorce proceedings. Filed by Victoria Hayes' attorney. And attached to it, a lawsuit. Victoria was suing for financial compensation for 7 years of marital limbo, claiming his negligence had prevented her from remarrying and moving on with her life. She's suing you, I said flatly. For $200,000. David closed the door and leaned against it. We don't have that kind of money. No. We don't. I set the papers on the hall table. But apparently she thinks we do. Or maybe she just wants to punish you. Can't say I blame her. Rachel, please. He reached for me again, and this time I let him take my hands. I know I've messed up. I know this is huge. But we can get through it. We've been through hard times before. Not like this. I pulled my hands free. Hard times are losing a job or dealing with a sick parent. This is you having a whole secret past you never told me about. This is our marriage potentially being invalid. This is being sued for money we don't have by the woman you're apparently still married to. I'll fight it. I'll get a lawyer, fight the lawsuit. She can't prove I deliberately didn't file those papers. Can't she? Because it seems like a pretty big thing to forget. Most people follow up on their own divorce, David. Most people make sure that chapter of their life is actually closed before starting a new one. He had no answer for that. We stood in the hallway of our house, the house we thought we owned together, and the silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, I said the words I'd been trying not to think. I need some space. I need time to think about all this. Panic flashed across his face. You're leaving? I'm going to stay with my sister for a few days. Just until I can wrap my head around this. Rachel, no. Please don't go. We need to deal with this together. Together? The word tasted bitter. We're not together, David. We never were, apparently. You were with someone else this entire time, at least on paper. So maybe it's time I figure out who I am without you. I walked to our bedroom, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and started throwing clothes into it. David followed, hovering in the doorway, but he didn't try to stop me. Maybe he knew there was no point. Maybe he finally understood that some things couldn't be fixed with apologies and promises. When I was packed, I carried my suitcase to the car. David watched from the porch, looking small and lost. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to tell him we'd figure it out. But the larger part, the part that was reeling from betrayal and fear and anger, just wanted distance. I'll call you, I said from the driver's seat. I love you. His voice cracked. That was never a lie. Everything I feel for you, everything we built together, that's real. I didn't answer. I backed out of the driveway and drove away, watching him shrink in the rearview mirror until he disappeared. My sister Jennifer lived in a small apartment in northwest Portland. She was 5 years younger than me, a graphic designer who'd never married and seemed content with her independence. When I showed up on her doorstep at 9 at night with a suitcase and tear-streaked face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside and poured us both large glasses of wine. Is David hurt? She asked once we were settled on her couch. Are you hurt? Should I be calling someone? No. Yes. I don't know. I took a long drink of wine. David's been lying to me for 20 years. I told her everything. The phone call, Victoria Hayes, the marriage that had never ended, the lawsuit, all of it spilling out in a torrent of words. Jennifer listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, anger, and disbelief. When I finished, she set down her wine glass carefully. I'm going to kill him. Get in line behind his first wife. Rachel, this is insane. How could he not know he wasn't divorced? How does that even happen? He says he thought it was handled. That he signed papers and assumed his lawyer filed them. Jennifer snorted. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Nobody just assumes their divorce is final. You follow up. You get confirmation. You make sure. That's what I said. So what are you going to do? I stared into my wine glass, watching the red liquid catch the light. I don't know. I need a lawyer, obviously. I need to figure out if our marriage can even be salvaged legally, let alone emotionally. I need to talk to our daughter, tell her that her parents aren't actually married and never have been. Oh God, Megan. Jennifer's face fell. How do you even begin to explain this to her? I have no idea. Megan was 19, a sophomore at Portland State. She was supposed to be focused on her studies and her future, not dealing with the implosion of her parents' marriage. Maybe I wait until we know more. Until we have answers instead of just questions. Or maybe you tell her now, before she hears it from someone else. I hadn't thought of that. But Jennifer was right. In a lawsuit, things became public record. If this went to court, if Victoria pushed her case, people would find out. And Megan deserved to hear it from me, not from some court document or gossip chain. I hate this, I said softly. I hate that David's mistake is affecting everyone. You, Megan, me. Even Victoria, in a way. All because he couldn't be bothered to make sure his past was actually in the past. What does Victoria want? Besides money, I mean. She wants the divorce finalized. She wants to move on with her life. And honestly, I can't blame her. She's been in limbo for 7 years because of David's negligence. Jennifer refilled both our glasses. Here's what I don't get. If she wanted the divorce finalized so badly, why didn't she follow up? Why is this all on David? According to her, they agreed he would handle his portion of the paperwork. She did hers. She assumed he'd do his. It wasn't until recently, when she tried to file some updated documents, that she found out it was never completed. So she's been living her life thinking she was divorced, just like David was. Exactly. We're all victims of his carelessness. I set my glass down before I could drink any more. I needed to keep a clear head. The worst part is, I believe him when he says he didn't do it on purpose. I believe he really thought it was handled. But that almost makes it worse, you know? That he was so checked out, so ready to move on, that he didn't even bother to verify something that important. What are you going to do about the house? The house. I hadn't even started to process that. If our marriage wasn't legal, then the house we'd bought together, the mortgage we'd taken out jointly, all of it existed in some kind of legal gray area. Could I even claim half of it if we split up? Did I have any rights at all? I need a good lawyer, I said. Maybe the best lawyer I can't afford. Jennifer grabbed her phone. My friend Claire is a family law attorney. She's handled some really messy cases. Let me text her, see if she can see you tomorrow. While Jennifer tapped out a message, I pulled out my own phone. 3 missed calls from David. A text message, please just let me know you're safe. I typed back, I'm at Jennifer's. I'm fine. Don't call me tonight. His response came immediately, I'm so sorry. I love you. I didn't reply. Love wasn't enough to fix this. Love hadn't kept him from being careless with our entire life together. Love hadn't made him follow up on the most important piece of paperwork in his history. Love was just a word, and words didn't mean anything when the foundation they stood on was made of lies and negligence. Claire can see you at 10 tomorrow, Jennifer announced. She's clearing her morning for you. I told her it was an emergency. Thank you. I hugged my sister, grateful beyond words. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd figure it out. You're the strongest person I know. She pulled back and looked at me seriously. But Rachel, you need to prepare yourself. This might get really ugly. If Victoria is serious about that lawsuit, if she can prove David's negligence caused her harm, you could lose everything. The house, your savings, all of it. We don't have savings. We've been living paycheck to paycheck for years. Then she might be wasting her time. You can't get blood from a stone. But I wondered if Victoria knew that. Or if she assumed David had money tucked away somewhere, resources she could tap. If she'd been living her life thinking she was divorced, maybe she'd also been living it thinking David had moved on to greater financial success. The reality, that we were middle-aged and still struggling to make ends meet, might come as a surprise to her. That night, I lay in Jennifer's guest room staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep despite the exhaustion weighing down my bones. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent now that I'd told David not to call. Part of me wanted to pick it up, call him back, let him explain again. But what more was there to say? The facts were the facts. He'd been careless, and that carelessness had destroyed the foundation of our life together. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went to Jennifer's kitchen. She was already there, working on her laptop, a cup of tea steaming beside her. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "Too much going on in my head." I made myself tea and sat across from her. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Have you ever felt like your life was a lie? Like everything you thought was true turned out to be false?" Jennifer closed her laptop. "When Mom died, I felt like that. Like the story I'd been telling myself about our family, about how we'd all grow old together and have holidays and grandkids, was just fantasy. Reality was that she was gone, and everything had to be rewritten. But that wasn't anyone's fault. Mom didn't choose to get sick. No. But David didn't choose to lie to you either. He made a mistake. A huge, life-altering mistake, but not a malicious one. Does that make it better or worse?" Jennifer considered this. "I think it makes it more complicated. If he deliberately deceived you, you could hate him cleanly. But this? This is someone you love who failed you through carelessness. That's harder to process." She was right. I couldn't simply hate David and walk away. 20 years of love and partnership didn't evaporate overnight, even in the face of something this catastrophic. But I also couldn't pretend this was a minor hiccup we could smooth over with time and patience. "I keep thinking about all the moments," I said quietly. "All the times we made big decisions together. Buying the house. Having Megan. My career choices, his career choices, all of it based on being married, being partners. And now I find out that partnership was built on quicksand." "But the love was real," Jennifer said. "The life you built, the daughter you raised, the memories you made. Those things happened. They're real, regardless of what was on paper." "Are they?" "Because right now it feels like I was living someone else's life. Like I was the understudy in a play, standing in for the real wife. You are the real wife. Paper doesn't make a marriage. Commitment does. Love does. You and David have that, whatever else is true." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that the legal complications were just that, complications, and that the substance of our marriage could survive them. But sitting in my sister's kitchen at 2 in the morning, sipping tea and trying to make sense of the wreckage, I wasn't sure belief was enough. Tomorrow I'd see the lawyer. I'd start untangling the legal mess. I'd figure out what rights I had, what options existed, how to protect myself and Megan from the fallout. But tonight, all I could do was sit in the darkness and mourn the marriage I thought I had, the life I thought I was living, the man I thought I knew. Because even if we survived this, even if we found a way to make everything legal and right, something fundamental had shifted. The trust I'd always taken for granted, the bedrock certainty that David and I were a team, had cracked clean through. And I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. The tea grew cold in my hands. Jennifer went back to her work. And I sat there in the pre-dawn quiet, wondering how a single phone call at 3 in the morning could unravel an entire life. Claire Martinez's law office was nothing like the sterile corporate spaces I'd imagined. It occupied the second floor of an old converted house in the Pearl District, with exposed brick walls and plants on every available surface. Claire herself was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. She listened to my entire story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. "This is complicated, but not as catastrophic as you might think," she began. "First thing you need to understand is that Oregon recognizes putative spouse rights. Essentially, if you entered into a marriage in good faith, believing it was valid, you're entitled to certain protections even if the marriage turns out to be legally void. So I'm not completely without rights? Not at all. The house, for instance. Even though the marriage isn't technically valid, you've been contributing to the household for 20 years. You have equity in that property regardless of what the paperwork says. Same with retirement accounts, joint assets, all of it. A court will look at the substance of your relationship, not just the legal technicalities. Some of the tension in my chest loosened. What about the lawsuit? Victoria Hayes is suing David for $200,000. Claire flipped through the papers I'd brought. This is interesting. She's claiming financial damages based on his failure to finalize the divorce, arguing it prevented her from remarrying and merging assets with a new partner. It's creative, I'll give her that. But it's also going to be very difficult to prove actual damages, especially if she's been living independently and hasn't suffered any concrete financial harm. So you don't think she'll win? I think she's angry and wants accountability. Whether a judge will award her this kind of money is another question entirely. Most likely, this lawsuit is leverage. She wants the divorce finalized quickly and cleanly, and she's using the threat of financial ruin to make sure David cooperates. I thought about Victoria standing in her office, surrounded by her diplomas and achievements. A woman who saved lives and commanded respect. Had she filed this lawsuit out of genuine financial need, or was it punishment? A way to make David suffer the way she had suffered, trapped in a marriage that had ended years ago but refused to die on paper? What should I do? I asked. First, we need to protect your interests. I'm going to file a motion to intervene in the divorce proceedings. You're not technically a party to their divorce, but you're affected by it, and you have rights that need to be recognized. Second, we're going to get a full accounting of all marital assets, yours and David's. Everything you've acquired during your time together needs to be documented and valued. And David? Should I be talking to him? Claire's expression softened. That's not a legal question, that's a personal one. From a purely practical standpoint, you need to communicate enough to handle logistics. Bills, property maintenance, coordination about your daughter. Beyond that, it depends on what you want. What did I want? 48 hours ago, I would have said I wanted to grow old with David, to send our daughter into the world and then enjoy the quiet years together. Now I didn't know what I wanted except answers, and even those seemed insufficient. How long will all this take? I asked. Finalizing the divorce between David and Victoria? That could be relatively quick if everyone cooperates. A few months, maybe less. Sorting out your situation with David, protecting your assets, figuring out what comes next. That's going to take longer. 6 months minimum, possibly a year or more if things get contentious. A year. A year of living in limbo, of not knowing what my life would look like on the other side. I thought about work, about Linda and the Henderson case and the daily battles over insurance coverage and patient care. How was I supposed to focus on any of that when my personal life was imploding? One more thing, Claire said. I need to ask this, and I know it's difficult. Do you want to stay married to David? Assuming we can get everything sorted legally, assuming his divorce from Victoria is finalized and you can have a legitimate marriage, is that what you want? The question hung in the air between us. Did I want to stay married to a man who'd been so careless with our life together? Who'd built our entire relationship on a foundation he'd never bothered to verify was solid. 20 years of love weighed against one massive, life-altering mistake. I don't know, I admitted. A week ago I would have said absolutely yes. Now I'm not sure I even know who I'm married to. That's fair. You don't have to decide today. But as we move forward, it will help to have some sense of your goals. Whether we're trying to preserve this relationship or protect you as you exit it. After I left Claire's office, I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. The morning was gray and drizzly, typical Portland weather that matched my mood. People hurried past on the sidewalk, caught up in their own lives, their own problems. I wondered how many of them were walking around with secrets like David's, with hidden past lives they tried to erase by simply not thinking about them. My phone buzzed. A text from George Patterson, "Where are you? Linda's looking for you." I'd completely forgotten about work. In the chaos of the last 2 days, my job had ceased to exist in my mind. I checked the time. Nearly 11. I was supposed to have been at the staff meeting where Linda was going to acknowledge my work on the Henderson case. I called George. He answered on the second ring. Rachel, thank God. Linda's been trying to reach you. Are you okay? I'm dealing with a personal emergency. I should have called in, I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just tell me what you need. Do you need time off? Should I tell Linda something? Dear, reliable George. He'd probably covered for me already, made some excuse for my absence. I need a few days. Maybe a week. I can't really explain right now, but it's serious. Done. I'll handle Linda. You take care of whatever you need to take care of. He paused. Rachel, if you need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. Understand? Thank you, George. I mean it. After we hung up, I finally started the car and drove. Not back to Jennifer's apartment, not to the house I shared with David. Just drove through the city, letting the rhythm of traffic and stoplights numb my racing thoughts. I ended up at Laurelhurst Park without really meaning to. David and I used to bring Megan here when she was little. She'd play on the swings while we sat on a bench and talked about nothing important. Back when life was simple, when the biggest decision we faced was what to make for dinner or which movie to watch. I parked and walked into the park despite the drizzle. The playground was empty, too wet for children. I sat on the same bench we'd occupied dozens of times and stared at the swing set, remembering Megan's 3rd birthday. David had pushed her on the swings while I took photos, capturing her joy in motion. She'd laughed so hard, begging him to push higher, higher. I'd called out to be careful, but he'd just grinned at me and said she was fine, she was fearless. Had that man been lying to me even then? Had he looked at our daughter and known that technically, legally, she'd been born out of wedlock because he'd never bothered to finalize his divorce? Or had he genuinely believed everything was fine, that the past was dead and buried and we could all just move forward without looking back? My phone rang. David. I stared at his name on the screen, my thumb hovering over the decline button. But something made me answer. Rachel. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying or hadn't slept. Please tell me you're okay. Just tell me you're safe. I'm safe. I'm at the park. Laurelhurst? He knew without asking. Of course he did. We'd lived our entire adult lives together. He knew my patterns, my default settings. Can I come? Can we talk? I don't think that's a good idea. Please. I need to see you. I need to explain things properly, not in the middle of a crisis. Just give me 30 minutes. If you still want me to leave after that, I'll leave. Against my better judgment, I agreed. What more harm could it do at this point? While I waited, I watched the rain create expanding circles in the puddles, small chaos spreading outward from each drop. David arrived 20 minutes later, parking next to my car and jogging through the rain to the covered area where I sat. He looked terrible. His hair was disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot. He wore the same clothes he'd had on yesterday, like he'd been up all night. Thank you for seeing me, he said, sitting on the bench but keeping distance between us. I know you don't owe me anything. You're right. I don't. He flinched but nodded. I've been going over everything in my head, trying to figure out how I let this happen. And the truth is, I was a coward. When Victoria and I split up, it was ugly. Not fighting or screaming, just this painful acknowledgement that we'd made a mistake. I wanted to forget it ever happened. So I signed the papers my lawyer gave me, handed them back, and then just assumed the rest would happen automatically. You can't assume something like that. I know. But I did. And then months passed, and I met you, and by then I'd convinced myself it was all handled. You were so different from Victoria, so warm and genuine and easy to be with. I fell in love with you immediately. When you asked about my past, I told you about the relationship but not the marriage because in my head, it wasn't relevant anymore. It was over. Except it wasn't. Except it wasn't, he echoed. And by the time we got married, I'd buried that part of my life so deeply I honestly didn't think about it. I know how that sounds. I know it seems impossible that someone could forget they weren't actually divorced. But I did. I just erased it from my mind because I wanted so badly to start fresh with you. I watched the rain fall beyond our shelter, each drop its own small tragedy. Do you have any idea what you've done? The position you've put me in? Put Megan in? I do now. And I'm going to fix it. I've already contacted 3 lawyers. I'm going to finalize the divorce with Victoria as quickly as possible. I'm going to fight her lawsuit. And then I'm going to make sure you and I are legally married, properly this time. You think that fixes it? You think some paperwork makes this go away? No. But it's a start. He turned to look at me directly. Rachel, I know I've broken your trust. I know I've destroyed something that took 20 years to build. But I'm asking you, begging you, to give me a chance to earn it back. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. I don't know if I can. The words hung between us. I watched him absorb them, saw the pain register on his face. But I couldn't comfort him. I couldn't be the person who made him feel better about the disaster he'd created. I met with a lawyer this morning, I said. She's going to help me protect my interests. Make sure I don't lose everything because of your mistake. That's smart. That's good. He sounded sincere. Whatever you need to do to feel safe, do it. I'm not going to fight you on anything. What about the house? It's yours as much as mine. More, really. You're the one who made it a home. He rubbed his face with both hands. I've been thinking about our conversation last night. About how you said you don't know who I am. And you're right. I haven't been honest about my past. So let me be honest now. Ask me anything. Anything at all. I'll tell you the truth. I thought about all the questions crowding my mind. But there was only one that really mattered. Did you ever love Victoria the way you love me? He was quiet for a long moment. I thought I did at the time. We were young, impulsive. We got married after knowing each other 6 months. But no, it wasn't the same. With Victoria, it was passion and excitement but no depth. With you, it's everything. You're my best friend, my partner, the person I want to tell everything to. That's why this is killing me. Because I finally found something real and I'm the one who destroyed it. You didn't destroy it on purpose. Does that make it better or worse? I echoed Jennifer's question back to him, unsure of the answer. We sat in silence, watching the rain. After a while, David spoke again. I called Megan this morning. I wanted to tell her before she heard it somewhere else. My heart stopped. What did you say? I told her there were some legal complications with our marriage. That I'd made a mistake years ago that we were working to fix. I didn't give her all the details, but I told her enough that she wouldn't be blindsided. How did she take it? She was confused. Scared. She asked if we were getting divorced. He looked at me. I told her I didn't know. That it was up to you. The weight of that decision settled on my shoulders. Megan's whole world, her sense of family and security, hanging on what I decided to do next. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. I need more time, I said finally. I can't make any decisions right now. I'm too angry and hurt and confused. I understand. David stood up slowly. I should let you go. But Rachel, one more thing. I know you're staying with Jennifer. I know you need space. But the house is yours too. If you want to be there and you want me to leave, I'll leave. I can stay at a hotel or find a short-term rental. Whatever makes you more comfortable. The offer surprised me. I'd assumed I'd be the one in exile, camping out at my sister's apartment indefinitely. I'll think about it. He nodded and walked back to his car through the rain. I watched him go, this man I'd spent half my life with, who suddenly seemed like a stranger. But underneath the anger and betrayal, I could still feel the love that had sustained us for 2 decades. It hadn't disappeared. It was just buried under layers of hurt. I sat in the park until the rain stopped and pale sunlight broke through the clouds. Then I drove to Mercy Ridge Medical Center. I wasn't ready to go back to work, but there was something I needed to do. Victoria Hayes's office was in the cardiology wing. I made my way there, my heart pounding, uncertain what I was going to say but knowing I needed to say something. The receptionist recognized me from my previous visit and didn't try to stop me when I walked past her desk and knocked on Victoria's door. "Come in." She was at her desk, reviewing what looked like patient charts. When she saw me, she set down her pen carefully. "Rachel. I wasn't expecting to see you again. I wasn't expecting to come back." I closed the door behind me. "But I think we need to talk. Really talk, not just throw information at each other." Victoria gestured to the chair across from her desk. I sat down, and for a moment we just looked at each other. Two women whose lives had been irrevocably tangled by one man's carelessness. "I got your lawsuit papers," I said. $200,000 is a lot of money for someone to forget to file paperwork. I'm not actually after his money. Or yours, for that matter. Victoria leaned back in her chair. "My lawyer advised me that filing a financial claim would expedite the divorce proceedings. David's been dodging my calls for a week. I thought maybe the threat of losing everything would get his attention. It got his attention. And mine. And our daughters. You have a daughter." Something flickered across Victoria's face. Regret, maybe, or sadness. "How old?" 19. "She's in college." "I'm sorry. I didn't think about how this would affect other people. I was just so angry." 7 years, Rachel. 7 years of thinking I was divorced, of structuring my life around that belief. And then to find out I'd been legally married this entire time? She shook her head. It felt like he'd stolen those years from me. He's stolen 20 years from me. The words came out harsher than I intended. "You got 3 years and a clean break, even if the paperwork wasn't filed. I got 2 decades built on a lie." It wasn't a lie to him. That's what makes this so complicated. Victoria pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. "I've been thinking about this a lot since you came here. About whether David deliberately deceived us or just made a terrible mistake. I went back through our divorce correspondence. Look at this." I opened the folder. Inside were emails between Victoria and David from 7 years ago. Discussion about splitting assets, agreements about who would keep what. And at the end, an email from David, "My lawyer has the final papers. Should be wrapped up in a few weeks. Thanks for being reasonable about everything. I wish you well, Victoria." He thought his lawyer was handling it, I said, reading the email again. He really believed it was being taken care of. That's what I think too. Which means we're all victims of his negligence, but none of us are victims of his malice. He didn't set out to hurt anyone. He just failed to follow through on the single most important piece of paperwork in his life. I closed the folder and slid it back across the desk. "So what now? You still want the 200,000? "No. I'm dropping the financial claim." Victoria pulled out another document. "I just want the divorce finalized. That's all I've ever wanted. To officially end something that ended years ago so I can move forward with my life. Can you understand that?" I could. More than she probably knew. "I'll make sure David cooperates. My lawyer is already involved. We'll get this sorted out as quickly as possible." "Thank you." Victoria stood and walked to the window, looking out over the parking lot. "For what it's worth, I don't hate him. I did, briefly, when I first found out. But mostly I just feel sad. We were so young when we got married. We had no idea what we were doing. And even though it failed, even though he fumbled the ending spectacularly, there were good moments. Times when I thought we might actually make it work." He said the same thing. "That you were young and impulsive." She turned back to me. "What are you going to do?" About your marriage? I don't know yet. Right now I'm just trying to get through each day without falling apart. That's as good a plan as any. Victoria came back to the desk and wrote something on a piece of paper. This is my personal cell number. If you need anything, if you have questions or just need to talk to someone who understands what you're going through, call me. I know we're in a strange position, but maybe we can help each other navigate this mess. I took the number, surprised by the gesture. Why would you help me? Because David hurt both of us. Because we're both trying to move forward from the same mistake. Because women should support each other instead of tearing each other apart. She smiled slightly. And because I saw your patient advocacy work with Mrs. Henderson. You fought for her when everyone else gave up. Anyone willing to fight that hard for a stranger deserves support when she's fighting for herself. The unexpected kindness almost broke me. I blinked back tears and nodded. Thank you. I'll let you know as soon as the divorce paperwork is moving forward. I appreciate that. Victoria walked me to the door. Rachel? For what it's worth, I hope you and David can work this out. If what he has with you is real, if it's lasted 20 years despite starting on a faulty foundation, then maybe it's worth saving. I left her office with more questions than answers but feeling somehow lighter. Victoria wasn't the enemy. She wasn't trying to destroy my life or steal my husband. She was just another person caught in the ripple effects of David's mistake, trying to find her way to solid ground. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Where are you? I made dinner. I headed back to her apartment, to the temporary refuge she provided without hesitation or judgment. As I drove through the city, I thought about all the people whose lives intersected with mine. David and Victoria and Megan. George and Linda and Claire. Jennifer and her unconditional support. We were all connected by invisible threads, our choices and mistakes pulling at each other in ways we couldn't always see or control. David had made a choice 7 years ago to trust that his divorce was handled. That choice had led to consequences that spread like cracks in glass, affecting everyone he touched. But maybe that was true for all of us. Maybe we were all just doing our best with imperfect information, making decisions that seemed reasonable at the time and hoping they wouldn't detonate somewhere down the line. When I got to Jennifer's apartment, she had indeed made dinner. Pasta with marinara sauce, garlic bread, a simple meal that felt like comfort. We ate together in companionable silence, and I was grateful for her presence, for the way she knew when to ask questions and when to just be there. David wants to move out of the house, I said finally. So I can be there if I want. Jennifer looked up from her plate. What do you want? I want to wake up and have this all be a bad dream. But since that's not an option, I think I want to go home. It's my house too. I shouldn't be the one in exile. Then go home. Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm here whenever you need me. But go back to your own space, your own bed. Start figuring out what comes next from there. She was right. I couldn't hide at my sister's apartment forever, as tempting as that might be. I needed to reclaim my space, my life, even if I wasn't sure yet what shape that life would take. That night, I texted David, I want to come home tomorrow. Can you stay somewhere else for a while? His response came immediately, of course. I'll be gone by noon. Take all the time you need. I stared at the message for a long time before putting my phone away. Tomorrow I'd go home to a house that was mine but also wasn't, to a life that was real but also somehow fraudulent, to a marriage that had lasted 20 years but never actually existed. But at least I'd be moving forward. At least I'd be taking back some small measure of control. And maybe that was enough for now. The house felt different when I walked in the next afternoon. David had kept his word and cleared out, leaving behind only the faint scent of his cologne and a note on the kitchen counter. I'm staying at the courtyard on Multnomah. Call me if you need anything. I love you. I folded the note without reading it again and set it in a drawer. Then I walked through each room, reclaiming the space. Our bedroom. Megan's old room, now converted to a home office. The living room where we'd watched countless movies. Each corner held memories, but they felt distant now, like photographs of someone else's life. 3 months passed in a blur of paperwork and lawyers' meetings. Claire proved to be worth every penny I couldn't really afford, navigating the legal maze with efficiency and compassion. Victoria dropped her financial lawsuit as promised, and the divorce proceedings moved forward smoothly once David stopped dragging his feet. The hospital became my refuge. Mrs. Henderson's surgery was successful, and she sent me a card every week thanking me for fighting when others had given up. Linda softened after I returned to work, perhaps sensing that whatever personal crisis I'd weathered had changed something fundamental in me. I stopped apologizing for fighting too hard on behalf of patients. If the rules didn't serve the people they were meant to protect, then the rules needed to change. George retired in November with a small party in the break room. Before he left, he pulled me aside and pressed a business card into my hand. His nephew ran a nonprofit dedicated to patient advocacy and healthcare reform. They were looking for someone with experience and passion. "You're too good at this to waste your time pushing papers," George said. "Think about it." I did think about it. Long walks through Laurelhurst Park, conversations with Jennifer over wine, late nights staring at the ceiling. What did I want my life to look like? Who was I without David? The divorce between David and Victoria was finalized in early December. She sent me a text, "It's done. Thank you for helping make this happen. I wish you peace." I sent back a simple, "You too." 2 days later, David showed up at the house unannounced. I almost didn't let him in, but something about the way he stood on the porch, hands shoved in his coat pockets against the winter cold, made me open the door. "I got the papers," he said. "It's official now. I'm divorced from Victoria." "Good. Which means we can get married. For real this time. We can do it quietly, just the two of us and a judge. Make everything legal." I looked at him standing in the doorway of what had been our home. He looked older, worn down by months of guilt and separation. But underneath that, he was still David. Still the man who made terrible coffee and left his socks on the bedroom floor. Still the man who'd built me bookshelves and fixed the leak under the sink and held my hand through my mother's funeral. "I don't think I want to," I said quietly. The words surprised me as much as they surprised him. I hadn't known that was my answer until I spoke it aloud. "What do you mean?" "I mean I've spent 3 months living on my own. Making my own decisions. Not having to check with anyone about what I want or need. And I've realized something. I'm not the same person I was when we got married 20 years ago. Maybe I never really was that person. Maybe I just thought I was supposed to be." David stepped inside and closed the door against the cold. "Rachel, I know I messed up. But we can fix this. We can start over." "I don't want to start over. I don't want to go backward." I moved to the window, looking out at the street where children were playing in the first snow of winter. "I've been offered a job. Director of a patient advocacy nonprofit. It doesn't pay much, but it's meaningful work. Real work that could actually change things." "That's great. I'm proud of you." "I'd have to move. The organization is based in Seattle." Understanding dawned on his face. "You're leaving." "I think I need to. Not because I hate you or because I can't forgive you. But because I need to figure out who I am without being half of us." We stood in the living room of the house we'd shared for 15 years, and for the first time since the phone rang at 3 in the morning, I felt certain about something. This wasn't about punishment or anger. It was about choosing myself. "What about Megan?" David asked. "She's an adult now. She'll understand. Or she won't, and she'll be angry, and eventually she'll work through it. Either way, it's not a reason to stay in something that isn't working anymore. It could work. If we both tried. Maybe. But I don't want to spend the rest of my life trying to rebuild what was broken. I want to build something new." David's eyes filled with tears, and I felt my own eyes sting in response. 20 years couldn't be erased or dismissed. They had happened. They had mattered. But they had also ended, not with the phone call but with everything that came after. With the realization that the foundation I'd thought was solid had always been sand. "I'm so sorry," he said. "For all of it." "I know. And I forgive you." I meant it. The anger had burned itself out over the long months, leaving behind something quieter. Sadness, yes, but also acceptance. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. Sometimes it just means letting go. We worked out the details over the next few weeks. The house would be sold, the proceeds split evenly. Our assets would be divided fairly. Claire handled everything with her usual efficiency, and David's lawyer cooperated without contest. Whatever else he was, David wasn't vindictive. He signed every paper, agreed to every term, took responsibility for the mess he'd made. On a gray morning in January, I loaded the last box into a rented truck and took one final walk through the empty house. The walls still held the faint outlines where pictures had hung. The floors still creaked in the same familiar places. But it was just a structure now, not a home. The life that had filled it was gone. Megan came to say goodbye, driving down from school. We stood in the driveway while snow fell softly around us. "I don't understand why you have to move so far away," she said. "Couldn't you do this work here?" "Probably. But I need the distance. I need to start completely fresh." She hugged me tightly, and I held my daughter, this person David and I had made together despite everything. Whatever mistakes we'd made, however tangled our legal situation had been, she was real and whole and exactly who she was supposed to be. "Call me every week," she demanded. "Every week," I promised. David didn't come to see me off. We'd said our goodbyes privately, a quiet conversation that hurt less than I'd expected. He'd be okay. I'd be okay. We'd both survived worse than this. The drive to Seattle took 3 hours through winter rain. I found my new apartment in Capitol Hill, a small one-bedroom with hardwood floors and a view of the Space Needle. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Only mine. That night, I unpacked boxes and arranged furniture and made the space my own. When I finally collapsed into bed after midnight, exhausted but satisfied, my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria Hayes. "Heard you're in Seattle now. Welcome to the neighborhood. Coffee sometime?" I smiled and typed back, "I'd like that." The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of someone else's mistake pressing down on me. I was just Rachel Moreno, 43 years old, starting over in a new city with a job that mattered and a future that was completely uncertain. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was mine. I made coffee and stood at the window watching the city wake up below me. Somewhere out there, other people were facing their own 3 a.m. phone calls, their own moments of truth that would reshape everything they thought they knew. I hoped they'd find the strength to move forward, whatever that looked like for them. Because life didn't end when the foundation cracked. It just required you to build something new, something stronger, something that could stand on its own without needing someone else to hold it up. I took a sip of coffee and smiled at my reflection in the window. Then I grabbed my coat and headed out to begin. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.